So the world's largest exchange holds over 500,000 Bitcoin. And today I want to reveal why Coinbase just made a $400 billion Bitcoin backflip. Because in the past 3 weeks alone, we've seen Coinbase come out and their executive was trotted out on national news and said that Coinbase is being used by sovereign wealth funds to buy Bitcoin. That was interesting. That caused me to raise an eyebrow or two. But then, literally a week after this happened, we saw another executive from Coinbase, again, an exchange who historically hasn't been incredibly bullish on Bitcoin, come out. And this executive said, yeah, we actually think it's very likely that the American government is going to be selling hundreds of billions of dollars of gold and buying at least $100 billion worth of Bitcoin. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. Second week of April, that first announcement came out. Third week of April, the next Coinbase announcement came out. And now we have something even more interesting. Coinbase has just invested millions of dollars into this brand new Bitcoin specific advertisement that was literally just played in front of the eyeballs of over 10 million people yesterday at the NBA. So today I want to kind of unravel the mystery of maybe exposing what Coinbase knows that we don't. Why have they made a strategic pivot away from altcoins to being Bitcoin focused? And they're all only mentioning Bitcoin now. Is this Bitcoin cycle going to be different? There are a couple of the questions I want to explore with you guys today, but first let's play the clip.
If a Bitcoin was the size of a quarter, all 21 million of them would fit inside a single shipping container. But to fit the dollars the Fed prints on average every day, you'd need 72 shipping containers. Each year, you'd need 26,280 containers. And to fit what they've printed in the last decade, well, you'd need a lot more than that.
So I think firstly, it's really interesting that Coinbase is now actually recognizing what makes Bitcoin valuable that altcoins do not have. That's scarcity. Again, for those who may not be aware, Coinbase right now lists thousands, literally thousands of different altcoins on their exchange. And their CEO, Brian Armstrong, kind of made a little bit of a pivot around 10 years ago after he launched Coinbase. In the early days of Bitcoin, he was very pro-Bitcoin. Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the revolution. And then obviously he launched Coinbase, the largest gambling casino in the world. And he's like, oh, all of these other things have a lot of innovation. All of these altcoins, Web3, decentralization, all of this stuff is really nice. It has functionality, right? And then in the past 6 months, I'm detecting a little bit of a Bitcoin pivot in Brian Armstrong. And all of this is kind of happening at the same time that the Bitcoin on Coinbase is being absolutely drained, which is just another one of these little alarm bells I like to keep you guys focused on. We can see the total Bitcoin on exchanges being absolutely drained. Now we jump on over to have a look at Coinbase specifically. We can see some even more scary charts. The drainage on Coinbase in particular has been the worst out of any other exchange. I hope you guys can visualize that. You can see very clearly that the Bitcoin ripped off Coinbase is more Bitcoin than any other exchange. Okay, so what exactly is going on here? Why is Coinbase making a little bit of a Bitcoin pivot? Again, these are questions we're just going to keep in the back of our mind, but let's not forget BlackRock more recently has actually moved away from using Coinbase as their sole custodian for their Bitcoin ETF. Again, this is very, very, very important. But BlackRock has kind of said, yeah, you know what? We want to actually move to a completely different service provider who, believe it or not, is literally 15 times smaller than Coinbase. And we can see here very, very clearly, BlackRock taps Anchorage Digital as their Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF custodian. Who is Anchorage Digital, you might ask? Well, they're 15 times smaller than Coinbase. And you'd have to really ask yourself, why is BlackRock moving away from Coinbase? These are all interesting kind of questions I want you guys to keep in the back of your minds. when we're exploring this video today. Before we kind of answer the question of whether this Bitcoin cycle could be a little bit different, because again, what I think is interesting is typically our altcoins will outperform Bitcoin in a bull run. Most people have been familiar with that. But what if we're seeing something different this cycle? What if we're actually seeing the Bitcoin native plays act as the new altcoins? I'm talking about MicroStrategy and a lot of these other stocks that have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. A lot of these, stock tickers have been going bananas. They've been pumping aggressively, rallying aggressively, doing 10, 20, 30, 50, even 100x's like altcoins used to do. So again, I think this is a little bit of an interesting thought experiment. Why are we right now, over a year past the Bitcoin halving, but we're still not seeing Bitcoin dominance drop like it normally does? Again, it has been very seasonal for a long amount of time. And we can see if we pull up the chart of Bitcoin dominance, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. Typically, this thing starts crashing, indicating that altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin every time we're in the final kind of stages of a bull run. In the last year of each 4-year cycle, it's very common to see this chart crashing, indicating altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing something completely different this cycle. It's almost as if we have some very large players in the Bitcoin space potentially changing this cycle just a little bit. Again, speculation. But I want to play you guys a little bit of a clip from another Coinbase executive, kind of confirming these rumors here. So let's listen to this one from CNBC.
And retail via the ETF, we're exiting. So you got to kind of ask yourself, what do the institutions know?
Were the institutions buying Bitcoin direct? And how many of them are now buying via ETFs or other forms?
Well, hard to say. They don't, especially the sovereign wealth funds don't report.
Right. No, but you're also, I imagine, seeing the ETFs buying, because the ETF should be buying on
in the last couple of days.
But the ETF should be buying on a relative basis on behalf of their customer base.
Right, assuming there were inflows, right? But the last couple of days, yes, we've had inflow. But still, as of yesterday, should change today, we've had net negative ETF inflows. So. So the first reason is de-dollarization. The second reason is this tech unwinding of this big levered tech trade and Bitcoin trading on its core characteristics, which again are similar to gold. You've got scarcity, immutability, non-sovereign asset, portability. Right. So trading the way people who believe in Bitcoin would like it to trade. Mm-hmm. The last was, to me, the most interesting, which is I spoke to a couple of traders who said, look, if you believe these conditions, these de-dollarization conditions are going to persist, you're looking at gold, obviously, first and foremost, but maybe you missed out on that trade. You're looking at that rally and saying, I missed the boat on that. So what other assets could participate in that market panic long-term inflation hedge? When you do the work, there's a very short list of assets that mirror the characteristics of gold. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin is on that short list. In addition to the 4 characteristics I mentioned, its mining scarcity, its mining difficulty gets harder over time.
Yeah, and you can add 2 or 3 more good things about Bitcoin that you didn't even mention. So, I mean, maybe it never is used to wire money or whatever you want to call it over to the Far East or something, but you certainly can do it instantaneously, frictionless, right?
And you could do it overnight.
And you don't have to, in gold, I mean, you better, it's heavy, you better store it, you better insure it. I mean, there's a lot of things.
Portability is an under-looked at, it's under-emphasized skill asset. It's very, very hard to transport large amounts of cash. It's very, very hard to transport large amounts of gold. Right. You can't put $400 million of gold on a small disk drive, tuck it under your arm, and move if you need to.
CNBC is getting a little bit of the orange pill administrated by a Coinbase executive. After, again, historically, they've nearly been anti-Bitcoin. I don't want to go too far. I don't want to ruffle too many feathers on this live stream talking about the block size war from 2017. But let's just say a lot of the large exchanges have actually had the same opinion as Darren in the chat here. Oh, Bitcoin transactions are slower with higher fees. Again, this was the narrative from exchanges like Coinbase for many years. They're saying, all these altcoins, they're faster, they have lower fees. Aren't they better than Bitcoin? Comparatively, if we're comparing apples with apples, yeah, sure. But let's not forget, the other 25,000 altcoins are not like Bitcoin. They're not immutable. They've had their chains rolled back, like Ethereum, where the rulers get to change the rules whenever they lose a little bit of money. We've had the DAO hack. 15% of the Ethereum supply held by the insiders is now at risk of being stolen. How about we just roll back this quote-unquote immutable blockchain that Ethereum was supposed to be in 2017? Again, great. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Darren. It's a great point. A lot of these guys have been floating these narratives that are just, as C. Limmer in the chat has said, coked out mannerisms. I think a lot of these narratives are coked out mannerisms, not actually backed by reality, which is why I think it's so interesting that Coinbase is making the pivot they're making right now. Maybe it's the undeniable performance of Bitcoin that's driving this outperformance that Coinbase is seeing right now. Bitcoin is seeing right now, I should say, rather, because Bitcoin right now has been absolutely dominating these altcoins. I'm even personally pleasantly surprised that this rally has gone on for as long as it has. I mean, we are literally more than a year after the Bitcoin halving, and we still have not seen altcoins catch up to Bitcoin. Some people are saying, is this a new cycle? Will we ever see an altcoin rally ever again? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Nobody does know what's going to happen in the short or the medium term. But I think in the long run, I expect this chart to continue to climb back to 100%. Eventually, all these altcoins will be demonetized, and the business models of these really large exchanges like Coinbase, they will be wrecked. R-E-K-T, wrecked. Now, let's actually have a look. I know a lot of people ask me about the performance of Coinbase. Some people say, but Luke, it's performing well. Have a look at the stock price. I mean, take a look at this. It has bounced pretty hard off the bottom. Don't get me wrong. Coinbase is now at about $200 a share, up from a local low of $32 a share. But again, I just think Coinbase right now has missed the biggest opportunity in human history. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. What has Michael Saylor done with MicroStrategy? He's taken his company from being a dead company worth $1 billion to being a $100 billion giant. And it actually has one of the largest treasuries in the entire world. I've got a chart here for you guys actually showing us that MicroStrategy, the tiny dead tech stock that's been trading sideways for 20 years, now actually has the 7th largest treasury in the whole world. The only companies around the world who have bigger treasuries than MicroStrategy is names like Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and then there's MicroStrategy. What's going to happen when MicroStrategy has the largest treasury in the world? Do we think it's going to become undeniable that the Bitcoin strategy is the only and winning strategy? Because let's not forget, Coinbase has absolutely fumbled the ball. They launched in 2013. They diversified their balance sheet. They put a ton of money into a ton of trash, all of these different altcoins, and they had the opportunity to buy a lot of Bitcoin very early. They didn't even have to buy a lot. They just had to believe a little bit more in the thing that's actually built their entire business model, Bitcoin, and Bitcoin only. And guess what? Coinbase didn't believe in Bitcoin. And this is why we've seen Coinbase completely demonetized. And this is why we've seen Coinbase, as we can see by the chart, not keep up with MicroStrategy or the performance of any of the other Bitcoin native companies who are putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet and actually believing in what they own and actually understanding what Brock here in the chat has said. Bitcoin is the best store of value. And I think it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Again, we've had money for 8,000 years. Every single form of money we've used and adopted, it's been able to be manipulated, printed. We've been able to, print fake money, devalue the money, like the gold coins. The emperors of all of these kingdoms thousands of years ago were always able to debase the money, even when we're using hard money, like gold or the silver denarius as coins that the Roman Empire used thousands of years ago. Our emperors, our kings, our rulers, everybody was always able to debase the money. And now we finally are transitioning to a form of money that cannot be debased. Who knows what this adoption of Bitcoin is going to look like? We've never seen it before. I think we're transitioning from analog money to digital money for the first time in human history. And to Brock's point, it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And we're now beginning to see some of the largest players in the game realize that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I have a clip here, again, from a Coinbase executive that came out last week talking about why America is likely to sell and dump hundreds of billions of dollars of this analog money, gold, to buy a lot of Bitcoin. The number he mentions is even more interesting for a lot of reasons. I want to cover this gentleman's clip here in a moment. But first, again, we are talking a lot about Coinbase. We're talking a lot about BlackRock and exchanges. I always encourage you guys, please do not trust fake exchanges who are rumored to not even be holding Bitcoin. I always encourage you guys to go and check out real Bitcoin-only exchanges, and preferably exchanges who teach you and encourage you to self-custody your Bitcoin. This is why I'm a huge fan of the Bitcoin Well. And the Bitcoin Well is actually one of my favorites, because when you sign up with a Bitcoin Well, they give you free Bitcoin for buying Bitcoin. No, that's not a gimmick. I didn't stutter. That is true. This is what the dashboard looks like when you sign up on the Bitcoin Well. You can see in the very top right-hand corner, I've got 1,050 tokens here to play the Bitcoin wishing well. So when you buy Bitcoin on the Bitcoin Well, you actually receive these tokens and you can play the Bitcoin wishing well. Look at that. You're being transported back to 1996. It's the year I was born. That's a funny coincidence. So again, my wishing well is not working today, but I would highly encourage you guys to sign up with the Bitcoin Well, go into the draw to potentially win 1% of a Bitcoin. That's right, 0.01 Bitcoin is the top prize you can win on the Bitcoin wishing well. And you can even redeem your tokens for some pretty cool things. You see, if you got 69 million points, you can redeem a Cybertruck, a Bitcoin orange Cybertruck. I think that's pretty cool. And you can even get, look at this, you can even get stamp seed titanium plates with 12,000 points. Now, speaking of titanium plates, if you don't want to wait until you've accumulated 12,000 points over on the Bitcoin wishing well to be able to buy these titanium plates from Stampseed, if you want to back up your Bitcoin 12 or 24 word backup phrase correctly today, I got some good news for you. Stampseed is always going to take your money. They are back in stock. As you can see, these sexy titanium plates are what your Bitcoin 12 or 24 word private seed phrase should be backed up on. Again, I absolutely love these things. You guys can get 15% off absolutely anything you want to buy from Stampseed with a promo code Luke15. So take advantage of that promo code while it lasts. Stampseed did actually run out of stock in Q1 2025 because these plates are so damn popular. Okay, so again, let's talk a little bit more about Coinbase, a product that I think should not be so popular. Again, Bitcoin over crypto. Crypto is, as we can see by this chart, being demonetized by Bitcoin. It is only a matter of time before I think we see Bitcoin dominance rise to 80%, rise to 90%. I think we're going to see maybe a trend change. Maybe this cycle is a little bit different. Maybe, just maybe. Something that could make this cycle a little bit different is the clip I'm about to play for you guys. This is, again, a Coinbase executive. Again, just ask yourselves, why are we seeing it's actually three now, very bullish nuggets of information being dropped by Coinbase, the world's largest exchange, in the 3rd week of April, the 4th week of April, and now they've spent millions on this advertisement that was just seen by over 10 million eyeballs at the NBA playoffs. Why now? Strategically times pieces of bullish news nearly every week now. Pay very close attention to what Coinbase is doing and saying.
Gold to current market pricing. That would create a mark-to-market gain of $900 billion, right? And if you look at, I think the Senator Lummis bill was calling for buying, I think it's 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years. Well, that's $100 billion, if I have the math right. So our back of the envelope is that when the revaluation occurs, that creates a $900 billion, given today's market price, mark-to-market gain, which then is money that the Treasury could then take. And then the Treasury would be able to use that money in the Sovereign Wealth Fund in a budget-neutral manner to go and buy a variety of things, we think probably including Bitcoin. And just to think about the math.
Before we think about the math, I've got some math that I want to show you guys that I think a lot of people forget. So how much Bitcoin's on exchanges today? You know, it's somewhere around 2.5 million coins. Bitcoin's at about, what, $100,000 a pop? So that means we have about somewhere around $250 billion worth of Bitcoin on exchanges for sale. And we can see this number is dropping like an absolute rock. I'm going to jump on over to my favorite chart that I think visualizes this supply suffocation even better. You can see over the past 2.5 years, 900,000 coins have left the exchanges. And now we have, I just played you the clip, Coinbase executives saying, yeah, America could buy $100 billion worth of Bitcoin. The only problem is, what if they can't? We also saw Michael Saylor last week announce he wants to buy $84 billion worth of Bitcoin. So quick maths, 84 billion from Michael Saylor, 100 billion from America, $184 billion of potential demand. And there's only $250 billion worth of Bitcoin on exchanges. I really think we're getting into what I think is a dangerous situation when it comes to the Bitcoin supply. I think it's so dangerous, I've even filmed a video on this that's going to be released potentially tomorrow, breaking down this supply suffocation in a lot more detail. Because I think they're getting mission critical, so to say. Things, I think, are escalating really quickly. And I think people really need to start thinking about the end game of Bitcoin. Because the end game for Bitcoin isn't 500,000 a coin or $1 million a coin. I think things are going to get a whole lot more interesting. And when you really crunch the numbers, and you think about what Bitcoin could be valued at in a potential end game, I don't even think the most bullish Bitcoiners have really run those numbers. But luckily, I have run a few of those numbers. So if you do want to learn a little bit more about how much Bitcoin I think the everyday person needs for retirement, I filmed a video looking at Bitcoin and this end game that I think is coming recently in a couple of different videos. After this live stream is finished, I'm going to put links to both of those videos up on screen somewhere around there. And with all that said, guys, thank you so much to the 842 of you guys tuning in between Twitter and YouTube live. I'll see you on the next one.